And Moshe said, Hear, O Yisrael, Yahweh your Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your being, and with all your might. And these words which I'm commanding you today shall be in your heart, and you shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk by the way, when you lie down and when you rise up, and shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom to everyone worshiping with us at home. I hope you enjoy the message today. I hope you are having a blessed day wherever you are. The name of the message today, well, I'm not going to tell you the name of the message yet. I'll tell you in a minute. I want to share a poem with you today. Okay? And it's a very famous poem by Robert Frost. And I think this is a really cool poem because it very aptly describes the experience of the decisions and the choices that we humans make, which ultimately take us to where we eventually arrive in our lives. The what ifs and the what is, or the what is. I don't know which one's right. The name of the message today is called The Road Less Traveled By. All right? The name of the poem is called The Road Not Taken. Now, I don't know if you know this or not, but sometimes in poems, the title of the poem is actually part of the poem itself, even though it's not one of the lines. Like, for instance, do you know what the shortest poem ever written was? The name of it was called Fleas. Fleas. Adam had them. That's the whole poem right there, Fleas. Adam had them. And you see, Fleas, the title tells you what, the subject matter was. And this poem is called the Road Not Taken. And though it seems to talk about, to some extent, wondering about the what ifs, if I had taken another road in my life, how things would have gone. But I don't really think that's so much what the poem's actually about. And it goes like this, The Road Not Taken. 2 roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it went bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though, as for that, the passing there had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads to way, I doubt if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. I think that's a really great poem. I mean, especially as a Torah-loving Nazarene follower of Yahushua. Have you not taken the road less traveled by? I ought to hear a bunch of amens out of that, yeah. Have you not found yourself, figuratively speaking, at some point where 2 roads diverged and made the decision to take the one less traveled versus the one that led to something more tempting? And that has made all the difference. It's a good song. That's a good poem for us. It's a good poem for us. Now, my intentions today is not to do an in-depth analysis of this poem or Robert Frost's religious convictions. I will share this with you. He was close friends later in his life with a Jewish rabbi named Victor Reichert. And Frost was not Jewish, but he had a lot of correspondences that they found in some of his personals between the two of them. And Frost referred to himself as an Old Testament Christian. Isn't that interesting? You follow that's some similarity there to Nazarene. But how far that went into his life, I really don't know. But as a Nazarene Israelite, I found that just to be a little interesting. My intent is for us to reflect on our own paths and ask the question, does it take me down paths of righteousness? You see, this poem does a great job of illustrating the same conflict that's described in the Scripture. The conflict between being lured or drawn by a softer, easier way, which is enticing and seems delightful and appeals to our senses, but in the end is unfulfilling and brings ruin. And the path that leads to life. All right? Now, I read in one place that Robert Frost said about this poem that it is a tricky poem, a very tricky poem. And one of the cool things that I find about poetry is that it can often be that it's open to personal interpretation. Okay? And for instance, in this poem, at the end of it, where it says, "And I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverge in the woods, and I took the one less traveled by, and that made all the difference." That this is a sigh of regret. Okay? And that seems to imply that this person in this poem regrets not taking the other path, sitting around thinking about what might have been if I'd have done this thing or that thing, and that the outcome of this decision has made all the difference in the way that things have turned out. But have you ever experienced a sigh of relief or joy? Yeah, I have plenty of times, and that's the way I prefer to read this. I prefer to read it that way, with a sigh of relief and making the right choice by taking the one less traveled by. And I am relieved with the outcome of the decision, which made all of the difference, right, in the way that things have turned out. You see, I've been on that road that the whole world takes and wanders down and reaped of its hateful harvest. I praise Yahweh that He brought me to a place in the woods where two roads diverged. How about you? Yeah. Yahushua talks about two diverging paths, and he instructs us in which one to take. Actually, there's a lot of places in the Scripture where this occurs, and we'll look at some of those. But let's look at this. Matthew chapter 7. Matthew chapter 7. We're going to start reading, well, let's see, we're going to be on page 923 in the 98 ISR. And we're going to start reading in verse 13. Enter in through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to what? Destruction. And there are many who enter in through it. That doesn't sound like the road less traveled, does it? Because the gate is narrow and the way is hard pressed, which leads to life, and there are few who find it. That's the one less traveled by, brothers and sisters. That's the one less traveled by. Enter through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter in through it. Because the gate is narrow and the way is hard pressed, which leads to life, and there are few who find it. Now, have you ever been told this one? Well, I guess you think I guess you think you're right and everybody else is wrong. Yeah. Listen, I'd like to think that I'm on the right path, okay? I'd like to think that I'm on the right path, but even if I'm not, going by the testimony of Yahushua right here, I can be pretty confident that the road that everybody else is on is the wrong one, and it leads to destruction. Amen? And he said not to be on that road. All right? And it's a good sign that I don't need to follow a crowd. Amen. Exodus 32:2 says, do not follow a crowd to do evil, nor bear witness in a strife, so as to turn aside after many. To turn aside what is right. I'm just saying. All right, now, as far as taking that one that's green and wants where that he talked about, the one that's appealing to our senses, and by extension to our sensuality in many cases. This is nothing new. All right? Let's see how it worked out for Adam and Hawa. Genesis chapter 3. Bereshit chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3, we're going to start reading in verse 1. And the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which Yahweh Elohim had made. And he said to the woman, is it true that Elohim has said, do not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, we are to eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, Elohim has said, do not eat of it, nor touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, you shall not certainly die, or you shall certainly not die. For Elohim knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be like Elohim, knowing good and evil. Now, just for the record here, the devil is pretty good at telling people that Elohim does not mean what he said, or he's not shooting straight with you. All right? Let me tell you, Elohim is shooting straight with you. And he's pretty clear about what he expects. All right? Verse 6. And the woman saw. All right? The woman saw that the tree was good for food. The same lady that had just said we're not even supposed to touch it. Okay? In just a blink of an eye. And the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable, see that word? To make one wise, and she took of its fruit and ate. Do you suppose maybe that somewhere she was already longing for something that she maybe wasn't supposed to have, that everything wasn't good enough? When I say everything wasn't good, to have access to everything else wasn't good enough. That all it took was one little, yeah, it's not like that, and everything's great, all right? And she also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made loin coverings for themselves. And they heard the sound of Yahweh Elohim walking about in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Yahweh Elohim among the trees of the garden. And Yahweh Elohim called unto Adam and said to him, where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, And I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid myself. And he said, who made you know that you are naked? Have you eaten of the tree which I commanded you that you should not eat? And the man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I ate. And Elohim said to the woman, what is this you have done? And the woman said, the serpent deceived me, and I ate. Now listen, the serpent had a hand in this, no doubt. All right? But the Scripture clearly says that the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and it was pleasant to the eyes. Whose eyes? Hers. Her eyes. And a tree desirable to make one wise. Make who wise? Her. And she took of its fruit and ate. All right, now, she did not follow the path that leads to life. Amen. She did not obey Yahweh, even though she knew what Yahweh had said. She knew what was expected. She followed her own desires, and it brought death. And this is actually the way of the world. This is the way that leads to destruction. I've known many instances where people followed the ways of the world and found themselves involved in something that they later regret for the rest of their lives. The rest of their lives. And I can tell you this, the devil chalks it up to another point made. You know, another point made. He loves it. We live with it. Now, look with me at 1 John chapter 2. First John chapter 2, page 1185, 98 ISR. Oh, I take it back. We're going to start reading in verse 15. It's 1186. Do not love the world, nor that which is in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. You see that? All right. It says, if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. 1 John chapter 2. Are y'all in Big John? (15) 1 John chapter 2, verse 15. Do not love the world, nor that which is in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. Because all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, are we getting sensual here? The lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. See, that's how the devil pitches to your desires right there. That's how he pitches to your desires. Lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world passes away, and the lust of it, but the one doing the desire of Elohim remains forever. Do you see you've got two diverging paths there? You've got the one that leads to destruction, the way of the world, and then you've got the way of Elohim, which remains forever. That's the path that everybody else is on, right? And just like Hawa, sometimes we want to say the devil made me do it. Or somebody else made me do it. But it all winds up coming back to we wanted to do it. Sometimes people actually want to blame it on Elohim. You know, well, he put this in my path, and if Yahweh gives you a test and you fail it, it's because you gave in to your temptation. All right? But look what James says about that. James chapter 1, page 1174. Yaakov. James chapter 1. I'm so sorry. No, that's right, that's right. James chapter 1, verse 13. Let no one say when he is enticed that I am enticed by Elohim, for Elohim is not enticed by evil matters, and he entices no one. But each one is enticed when he is drawn away by his own desires and trapped. Listen, I'm going to come back to this. If you find a wallet laying there and it's got money in it, all right, if the fact that that wallet's laying there is not enticing you, that's not what's enticing you. If you pick that up and you say, I'm going to return this wallet, but it don't have any cash in it. Well, see, that's because you were drawn away by your own lust. All right. So, let no one say when he is enticed, I am enticed by Elohim, for Elohim is not enticed by evil matters, and he entices no one. But each one is enticed when he, just like Hawa, is drawn away by their own desires and trapped. Then, when desire has conceived, it gives birth to what? To sin. And sin, when it has been accomplished, brings forth what? Death. Do not go astray. Astray from what? The path that leads to life. Do not go astray, my beloved brothers. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no change nor shadow of turning. Now look over in chapter 4, one page over, verse 1. Where do fightings and strivings come from among you? Do they not come from your pleasures that battle in your members? You desire and do not have. You murder and are jealous and are unable to obtain. You strive and fight, and you do not possess because you do not ask. You ask and do not receive because you ask evilly in order to spend it on your, what's that word? Pleasures. Adulterers and adulteresses. Do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity with Elohim? That sounds like what John was saying, isn't it? Whoever therefore intends to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Elohim. Or do you think that the Scripture speaks to no purpose? Does the Spirit which dwells in us intensely crave unto envy? But he gives greater favor because of this. He says, Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble. So then, subject yourselves to Elohim, resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. All right? But he's not going to flee from you if you're walking down the road that leads to destruction. He's not going to flee from you. Heck, he'll walk right by your side. He'll walk, and just like Hawa, he will lead you in ways that seem good, but that are not good. Now, how can he do that? Well, look at 2 Corinthians. Second Corinthians chapter 11. Going to be on page 1124. Second Corinthians chapter 11, verse 14. And no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as a messenger of what? Of light. All right? It's not surprising then if his servants also masquerade as servants of righteousness, whose ends shall be according to their works. Okay? So Satan, he won't just walk with you. He'll send his folks out there to lead you astray. All right? What we've got to do is follow our Messiah's example, and we'll have no problems. Now, there are so many examples of the Scriptures giving us a clear and defined choice about which path to take and which leads to where. And I just like to read through some of them and just look at them. Now, we don't have to turn here. This is just one verse, but Psalm 119, 105 says, Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. All right? That's a good thing to take with you when you're trying to walk down the narrow path that leads to life. All right? Proverbs chapter 2. Proverbs chapter 2, page 729. We're going to start reading in verse 1. You know, Yahushua seemed to quote the Proverbs a good bit. Kind of interesting how he'd weave those into his parables and his messages. Verse 1. My son, if you accept my words and treasure up my commands with you, so that make your ear attend to wisdom, incline your heart to understanding. For if you cry for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as hidden treasure, then you would understand the fear of Yahweh and find the knowledge of Elohim. For Yahweh gives wisdom. Out of his mouth comes knowledge and understanding, and he treasures up stability for the straight. A shield to those, what are those next two words? Walking blamelessly. Walking's what you do on a path, isn't it? Well, let's see if it keeps going in that same analogy there. Verse 8. To watch over the paths of right ruling, and the way of his kind ones he guards. Then you would understand righteousness and right ruling and straightness, every good path. For wisdom would enter your heart, and knowledge be pleasant to your being. Discretion would guard you, understanding would watch over you, to deliver you from the evil way, from the man who speaks perversity. Those who leave the what? Paths of straightness, to walk in the ways of darkness. You see there's two roads there. Who rejoice to do evil. They delight in the perversities of evil, whose paths are crooked, and they are perverted in their ways. To deliver you from the strange woman, from the foreigner who flatters with her words, who forsakes the companion of her youth, and has forgotten the covenant of her Elohim. For her house has sunk down to death, and her paths to the dead. See, we're still talking about paths. None going into her does return, nor do they reach the paths of life. So walk in the way of goodness and guard the paths of righteousness. For the straight shall dwell in the earth, and the perfect be left in it. But the wrong shall be cut off, and the treacherous ones plucked out of it. Two roads diverge there. All right? Look at Proverbs 4. And we're going to start reading in verse 14. Do not enter the path of the wrong, and do not walk in the way of evildoers. Avoid it. Do not pass by it. Is Yahushua telling you something new and improved when he says, enter through the narrow gate that leads to life, but don't go in the broad way that leads? No. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Amen? All right? Avoid it. Do not pass by it. Turn away from it and pass on. For they do not sleep unless they have done evil, and their sleep is taken away unless they make someone fall. For they have eaten the bread of wrongdoing, and they drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, that shines ever brighter unto the perfect day. You know, that may just be exactly why it says your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. All right? Verse 19. The way of the wrong is like darkness. They do not know it what they stumble. My son, listen to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not depart from your eyes. Guard them in the midst of your heart. For they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. Watch over your heart with all diligence, for out of it are the sources of life. Turn away from you a crooked mouth, and put perverse lips far from you. Let your eyes look forward and your eyelids look straight before you. Consider the path of your feet, and all your ways are established. Do not turn to the right or the left. Turn your foot away from evil. And another one is Proverbs 15:24. It says, the path of life is upward for the wise to turn away from the grave below. We want to look at one in the book of Psalms, chapter 16. Page 652. Psalm 16, verse 8. I have set Yahweh always before me, because He is at my right hand, I am not shaken. Therefore my heart was glad, and my esteem rejoices. My flesh also dwells in safety. For you do not leave my being in the grave, neither let your kind one see corruption. You show me the path of life. In your presence is joy to satisfaction, and your right hand are pleasure forever. You know, is it any wonder that James and John were talking about that the ways of the world were at enmity with the ways of Elohim? You know? So, from where are you heading, and from where are you going? And which road will you take? Which road will you take? Revelation chapter 21. We're going to start reading in verse 1. Revelation 21. In verse 1. And I saw a renewed heaven and a renewed earth, for the former heaven and the former earth had passed away, and the sea is no more. And I, Yochanan, saw the set-apart city, renewed Jerusalem, coming down from the heaven, from Elohim, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the heaven saying, See, the booth of Elohim is with men, and He shall dwell with them, and they shall be His people, and Elohim shall be with them and be their Elohim. And Elohim shall wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there shall be no more death, nor mourning, nor crying, and there shall be no more pain, for the former matters have passed away. And He who was sitting on the throne said, See, I make all matters new. And He said to me, Write, for these words are true and trustworthy. And He said to me, It is done. I am the Aleph and the Tav, the beginning and the end. To the one who thirsts, I shall give of the fountain of the water of life without payment. The one who overcomes shall inherit all of this, and I shall be his Elohim, and he shall be my son. But as for the cowardly and untrustworthy and abominable and murderers and those who whore and drug sorcerers and idolaters and all the faults, their part is in the lake which burns with fire and sulfur, which is the second death. Does this look like one path leads to life and one path leads to destruction? It certainly does to me. And you know, one of the other things that I see, this seems to be a consistent message all throughout the Scripture. We have got a choice. We have a choice which path we're going to take. And you know, Pesach's going to be here before you know it. It's just right around the corner, just a few weeks away. We're going to be doing some house cleaning. Amen. And it's time to get our houses in order now. You know, we need to always be prepared. All right? Because this is what I want to hear. This is what I want to hear on that day. I want to hear, well done, good and trustworthy servant. You were trustworthy over a little, I shall set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. How many want to hear that? Amen. All right? And again, Yahushua said in Matthew 7:13 and 14, enter through the narrow gate, because the gate is wide and the way is broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who enter through it. Because the gate is narrow and the way is hard pressed, which leads to life, and there are few who find it. And this is what I hope to say with a sigh of relief and joy. In that day, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. Yevrakeka Yahweh ba'ish mereka, Ya'er Yahweh panavaleka bikuneka, Yasa Yahweh panavaleka bi'asem lakash shalom. Yahweh bless you and guard you. Yahweh make His face to shine upon you and show favor to you. Yahweh lift up His face upon you and give you His complete contentment.